The Velkar Dominion was one of the oldest and most feared empires in the known galaxy. Their fleets had burned countless worlds, their soldiers had marched across the ashes of civilizations, and their flag had been raised over dozens of conquered suns. To the Velkar, war was not just a necessity, it was pride. Their history books were filled with tales of victory and dominance. From the moment a Velkar child could walk, they were taught that their species was born to rule. They believed no other race could match their strength, intelligence, or technology. So, when the High Command announced a new campaign, an invasion of a small blue planet called Earth, located in the Sol system, the soldiers laughed. In the long hall of the flagship Talon's Pride, laughter echoed between the steel walls. Rows of soldiers in silver armor sat at their tables, sharing food and boasting about how quickly they would conquer humanity. Humans, one soldier sneered, his sharp fangs glinting under the lights. I heard they still use chemical guns. Can you imagine that? Primitive weapons firing tiny bits of metal. Another soldier joined in, and they fight each other more than their enemies. The reports say they've never united under one flag. We'll probably win before they even decide who's in charge. The room erupted in laughter again. Some even began imitating humans, walking awkwardly or pretending to cry. To them, humans were just another weak race. Strange, emotional, and fragile. They had read stories about how humans once fought great wars on their own planet, but those stories were so old that no one took them seriously anymore. Only Commander Seltor sat quietly, observing from the corner of the hall. His black armor gleamed under the dim lights, and his eyes, deep silver, calm and sharp, studied his soldiers carefully. He had fought in more battles than most of them had years of life. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep and steady. You laugh at the humans, he said. But have you ever read the full records? The soldiers turned to him, their laughter fading slightly. One of them replied, Commander, those are ancient tales. Humans may have fought bravely once, but that was long ago. Their technology is nothing compared to ours now. Seltor stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. You're right, he said slowly. Their weapons are older. Their ships are slower. But those legends you mock, they were written in blood. And the blood of those who fight for survival burns hotter than you can imagine. The hall grew quiet. The soldiers glanced at each other, unsure if he was serious or trying to scare them. Seltor continued. There is something you should know. In every war I've studied, every world I've seen fall, there was always one constant. When humans are cornered, they do not surrender easily. They adapt. They fight harder. They become what they must to survive. A young officer smirked. Commander, are you saying those old legends are true? The ones where humans defeated fleets 100 times their size? Those are children's stories. Seltor didn't smile. Perhaps. But legends often begin with truth. He walked toward the viewing window where the endless darkness of space stretched before them. The stars shimmered like distant fires. Mock them if you wish, he said quietly. But remember this. Many before us laughed at the same stories. None of them laugh now. The next morning, the Talon's Pride prepared to jump through hyperspace. The soldiers, still confident, moved through the corridors, checking their weapons and armor. Their laughter had returned, though quieter now, like they didn't want the commander to hear. They were not afraid, yet the Sol campaign was supposed to be easy. The Velkar Dominion had crushed empires far more powerful. The humans had only a few scattered colonies and outdated ships. The War Council predicted total victory within 2 cycles. Barely a month by human time. As the ships lined up in formation, Commander Seltor stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. His second-in-command, Captain Varneth, approached. Fleet ready, Commander. All systems charged. Our path to Sol is clear. Proceed, Seltor replied calmly. The fleet's engines lit up, creating trails of blue fire. One by one, the massive ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only silence and fading light. As they traveled, Varneth looked at his commander. Permission to speak freely? Seltor nodded. Why are you so serious about these humans? Surely they are no threat to us. The commander's silver eyes flickered. Do you know why the High Command sent us to handle this mission? Varneth hesitated. Because we are the most experienced fleet in the Dominion? Seltor shook his head. Because others failed before us. Varneth's eyes widened. Failed? There are no records of that. Of course not, Seltor said quietly. The Dominion hides its shame. 2 scout fleets were sent before us, small but armed. Neither returned. The Council declared them lost to navigation errors, but I've seen fragments of their last transmissions. He turned to face his officer fully. They spoke of ambushes, of invisible weapons, of enemy forces that fought even after losing everything. Varneth frowned. That doesn't make sense. Humans don't have that kind of technology. Then perhaps, Zeltor said, it wasn't technology that destroyed them. When the fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace near the red planet called Mars, the soldiers pressed against the windows of their transports. They expected to see chaos, maybe primitive defenses, but the planet was quiet. Too quiet. Scanning complete, reported a technician. Minimal power signatures detected. Some ruins, old mining facilities, no active ships. A roar of laughter filled the bridge again. So much for the great human defenders, someone said. They probably ran away the moment they saw us coming. Commander Zeltor didn't laugh. He leaned closer to the holographic display, studying the map of the solar system. Order the first wave to deploy to Mars, he said. We will establish a forward base there before moving on to Earth. Yes, Commander. Within minutes, dozens of dropships broke away from the main fleet, descending into the thin Martian atmosphere. Their engines glowed like comets against the red dust below. The soldiers were relaxed, even joking over their comms. But as the first dropships neared the surface, something unexpected happened. A bright flash appeared on the radar, and then another. Before anyone could react, one of the ships vanished in a massive explosion. Then a second and a third. The communications channel filled with screams and static. Unknown weapons detected, shouted a technician. They're coming from the surface, and no, from orbit. What kind of weapons? Varneth demanded. Energy projectiles. No kinetic. High-speed metal slugs. Traveling faster than light intercept. Commander Zeltor's eyes narrowed. Railguns, he said softly. Impossible, Varneth replied. No railgun can hit that far, that fast. Humans made it possible, Zeltor said. They always do. The bridge went silent. Outside, dozens of explosions bloomed across the thin Martian sky. The fleet's scanners struggled to track the source of the attacks, and then, through the static, a voice came over the comms. Old, distorted, but clearly human. Welcome to Mars. You should have stayed home. The Velkar soldiers, who had spent weeks mocking human legends, fell into stunned silence. Commander Zeltor stood tall, his voice calm and steady as ever. Now, he said to his officers, do you still think the legends are lies? No one answered. For the first time, the laughter aboard Talon's Pride died completely, and far below, hidden beneath the red dust of Mars, the humans began to rise. The red planet of Mars had never looked so alive. Beneath its dusty surface, hidden bunkers began to awaken after decades of silence. Old lights flickered on. Deep underground, control rooms came alive as human operators checked screens filled with alien signatures. For years, the humans had prepared for this moment, not out of fear, but out of experience. They had seen what other civilizations had done when first contact turned into invasion. Humanity had learned from history, both its own and that of the galaxy. The Velkar Dominion believed they were attacking a primitive world. But Earth had not been idle. After losing contact with earlier scout fleets, the humans knew war was coming. They built quietly, far from the eyes of alien scanners. They used old mines, abandoned colonies, and even wrecked ships as hidden strongholds. And now, as the first alien fleet entered orbit, humanity was ready. On the bridge of the Talon's Pride, alarms flashed red. Commander, we are losing our forward ships. 3 more down. Commander Zeltor stood calmly in the center of the chaos. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes moved fast, studying every detail. Track the origin of the attacks, he ordered. Trying, sir. The railgun rounds are too fast. They appear from nowhere. The commander walked closer to the holographic map. They're not from nowhere, he said quietly. They're coming from the shadows. He knew it now. The humans had hidden their weapons, buried them, perhaps even disguised them as debris. Every piece of dust on Mars might hide death. The soldiers who once laughed at human legends now stared at their screens in fear. On the surface of Mars, Colonel Rebecca Hayes, leader of the Martian Defense Force, stood in her underground command room. She watched as enemy ships burned in the thin atmosphere above. Her voice was calm but firm as she gave orders. Target the next wave. Focus fire on their troop carriers. If they reach the surface, we fall back to Phase 2. Yes, ma'am, her officers responded. Hayes looked at the old flag on the wall, a faded emblem of Earth. It was torn, worn from years of battle, but it still stood. You wanted to test the old legends, she whispered. Let's show them why they're still told. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Velkar were trying to regroup. Captain Varneth turned toward Zeltor. Commander, the humans must have found alien technology. There's no other way their weapons could reach us at this range. But Zeltor shook his head. No, Captain. This is their own design. It is uniquely human. Uniquely human. Yes, their weapons are old-fashioned but perfected. They don't rely on energy beams or plasma. They use kinetic force, mass, and speed. Simple physics, yet devastatingly effective. Varneth frowned. So they've used simplicity against us? Zeltor nodded slowly. Yes, that is what makes them dangerous. The bridge grew quiet. Outside the viewing window, the red planet seemed calm again. The explosions had stopped, but Zeltor knew it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. In the lower decks of the ship, soldiers whispered among themselves. Did you see it? One said nervously. An entire dropship gone in a flash. Another soldier replied, I thought humans couldn't fight in space. They don't even have fleets like ours. Maybe they don't need fleets, a third muttered. Maybe the legends were right. Their laughter from before had turned into tense silence. Every sound and every flicker of light had made them jump. Back on Mars, Colonel Hayes moved to the communications terminal. Send message to Earth Command, she said. Tell them Phase 1 successful. Enemy fleet suffered major losses. We're moving to counter Phase 2 if they land. A young operator hesitated. Ma'am, if they do land, what then? Hayes looked at her calmly. Then we fight them on the ground. Just like our ancestors did, with grit, strategy, and courage. The operator nodded. Yes, ma'am. Hayes smiled faintly. Remember this, Lieutenant. We're not just defending Mars, we're proving that humanity still stands. Hours later, the Velkar launched another wave. Smaller, more cautious. Commander Zeltor knew he couldn't let this battle end in humiliation. Deploy the ground divisions, he commanded. We will take the surface directly. Varneth looked surprised. After what happened? That's suicide. The humans want us to fear them, Zeltor replied. If we hesitate, the entire Dominion will see us as weak. We will land, establish control, and show them that the Velkar do not retreat. Yes, Commander. Hundreds of dropships began their descent once again. The ships glowed like falling stars as they entered the Martian sky. At first, there was no resistance. The red dust cloud seemed empty. Then the ground opened. Hidden artillery platforms rose from beneath the sand. Automated cannons and missile pods locked onto the descending ships. In seconds, the sky was filled with streaks of light. The humans fired again. Not from one place, but from everywhere. Inside one of the dropships, a Velkar lieutenant gripped his seat as explosions lit up the horizon. Commander, the humans, they've built bunkers underground. Their defenses are everywhere. Stay calm. Zeltor's voice came through the comm. Land if you can. Adapt and survive. That is the only way. But before the lieutenant could answer, his ship was hit. It spun wildly before crashing into the rocky surface below. When the survivors crawled out, they were greeted not by open battle, but by silence. The wind blew red dust across the wreckage. The Martian horizon stretched endlessly, quiet and deadly. Then came a faint sound, the hum of engines. The aliens turned and saw small human drones flying low over the ground, scanning them. One soldier fired at them, destroying one drone, but 3 more appeared. Then the traps activated. Explosions burst across the field, carefully timed, precise, and deadly. The aliens scattered for cover, but the humans were already watching. From behind the ridges, armored human soldiers emerged, moving fast, efficient, silent. Their suits were painted in desert tones, blending with the red sand. The Velkar opened fire, but the humans didn't fight like a normal army. They hit fast, then disappeared. They used the terrain, the dust, and even the wreckage to their advantage. Where are they? One alien shouted. They're everywhere! Another cried. The humans were not the frightened primitives they had imagined. They were organized, ruthless in efficiency, and absolutely fearless. Back aboard the Talon's Pride, Varneth watched the battle from above. They're tearing our ground troops apart. Commander, what are your orders? Zeltor didn't answer immediately. He was watching the live feed, watching how the humans moved, how they fought. Every move had purpose. Every shot was precise. He finally said, "Pull back the second wave. The humans are testing us. We must understand them before we strike again. But Commander, that will show weakness. Better to appear weak than to die blind," Zeltor replied. He turned his gaze toward Mars. These humans fight like they have nothing left to lose, and that makes them dangerous. Far below, Colonel Hayes stood beside her soldiers as the dust settled. The battle was far from over, but for now the humans had pushed the aliens back. Hayes looked up at the sky, where faint flashes of light marked the retreating ships. One of her officers approached. "They're pulling back, ma'am," Hayes nodded. "Good. Let them think we're resting. We'll be ready for their next move." The officer hesitated. "Do you think they'll come back?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Of course. Arrogant empires always do, but when they return they'll remember what fear feels like." She turned toward her team. "Send message to Earth. Phase 2 complete. Humans still stand." The words echoed through the comms, reaching orbit, Earth, and beyond, and somewhere deep in space, among the scattered signals, alien listeners trembled as they heard that message. The same words that had haunted their ancestors' stories for generations. Humans still stand. On the Talon's Pride, silence filled the command deck. Commander Zeltor looked at the blue planet on his display, Earth untouched so far. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, "If this is how they defend a colony, what will it be like when we reach their home?" No one answered. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Velkar Dominion began to feel something they had not felt in centuries: doubt. The red planet had turned into a battlefield of dust, smoke, and fire. Mars, once quiet and empty, now echoed with the sounds of war. The clash of alien weapons and the roar of human artillery hidden beneath the surface. The Velkar Dominion had sent more troops, determined to crush what they thought was a small resistance. But the humans had turned Mars into a trap, a planet designed to bleed the invaders dry. Commander Zeltor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the live feeds from the battlefield. The alien troops were advancing through canyons and ravines, their armored vehicles rolling slowly under the red sun. "They're adapting," said Captain Varneth, standing beside him. "They've stopped sending large formations. Smaller squads now. They're moving carefully." Zeltor nodded slowly. "Good. At least they are learning. But learning won't save them from human patience." Varneth frowned. "Patience?" "Yes," Zeltor said. "Humans are not fast conquerors. They are survivors. They wait, they study, and when they strike, it is always where you least expect." The Martian front on the surface, Colonel Rebecca Hayes, led her soldiers through the ruins of an old terraforming station. The air was thin and every breath tasted like metal, but no one complained. These soldiers had trained for years beneath the red sky. Their armor was worn, scratched, and patched many times over. But their eyes were sharp and alert. "Status report," Hayes said, her voice calm through the radio. "Enemy forces advancing from the East Ridge," replied Sergeant Cole. "About 36 troops with support drones. They're scanning the area." Hayes crouched behind a rock, peering through her helmet visor. The alien shapes moved slowly in the distance, tall armored figures with glowing weapons. "Hold fire," she ordered quietly. "Let them come closer." The humans waited in silence, their hearts steady. They had no fancy energy shields or advanced targeting AIs. What they had was experience, and the will to fight no matter the odds. As the Velkar troops entered the canyon, Hayes whispered, "Now." A flash of light erupted from the cliffs above. Hidden charges detonated, collapsing part of the ridge and trapping several aliens beneath rocks. Snipers fired from the shadows, hitting precise weak points in the aliens' armor. The Velkar responded with plasma bursts that scorched the canyon walls. Their commander shouted orders in their sharp native tongue, trying to form a defense line. But the humans were already gone. They had vanished into tunnels beneath the ground, tunnels of fire. The Velkar followed, scanning the area with their glowing visors. The tunnels were dark, narrow, and filled with echoes. The air smelled of dust and old machines. One alien soldier whispered, This place feels alive. Another replied, "They hide like insects. We'll burn them out." They began to move deeper, but the deeper they went, the more uneasy they felt. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness, footsteps, machinery, whispers that didn't belong. Suddenly, lights flickered. The tunnel walls exploded with gunfire. Human soldiers emerged from hidden side passages, firing short bursts before vanishing again. The Velkar tried to return fire, but every shot hit empty air. Explosions echoed behind them, blocking their exit. Panic began to spread among the alien ranks. From somewhere above, a calm voice came through their comms. "Colonel Hayes, you should have stayed on your ships." The Velkar turned toward the voice, but before they could react, a section of the ceiling collapsed, crushing 2 soldiers. The price of pride back aboard the Talon's Pride, reports flooded in. "Commander, our troops are taking heavy losses. Human traps everywhere. We can't advance." Commander Zeltor stood still, silent as chaos surrounded him. "Enough," he said finally. "Pull back the eastern units. We will not waste soldiers in blind attacks." Varneth stared at him. "But Commander, the High Council ordered us to take Mars at any cost." Zeltor turned slowly to face his officer. "At any cost, yes, but I refuse to pay in stupidity." He looked back at the tactical screen. "The humans want us to act like brutes. They want us to rush in. That's how they've won every battle in their history, by making their enemies underestimate them." Varneth hesitated. "Then what should we do?" "Study them," Zeltor said. "Watch how they move, how they strike, and where they disappear. They have patterns. Even chaos leaves traces." He leaned closer to the holographic map. "And when we find those traces, we strike where they don't expect it, just as they do." The ghosts of Mars night fell across the Martian desert. The thin atmosphere turned the sky a deep crimson, filled with dust storms and faint glows from the stars beyond. Human soldiers moved silently across the sand, their visors dimmed, their movements precise. They called themselves the Ghosts, a nickname given by the aliens who fought them. In one destroyed colony outpost, they ambushed another alien patrol. The humans struck fast, cutting off communications, destroying drones, and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. When the Velkar arrived later, all they found were scorch marks and the words "We still stand" carved into the metal wall. The soldiers who saw it didn't laugh. They didn't even speak. A message to Earth deep underground. Colonel Hayes stood before a cracked monitor showing the Earth emblem. Her face was tired but proud. "This is Colonel Hayes of the Martian Defense Command," she said into the recorder. "We have held for 6 days. The enemy is larger and stronger, but they bleed like we do. They can be beaten." She paused. "If this message reaches Earth, tell the people not to fear. Humanity doesn't bow. Not to kings, not to machines, and not to empires." The signal was sent through encrypted channels toward Earth. Far away, in blue orbit, commanders and civilians would soon hear it. The message would ignite something powerful. Hope. The commanders Zeltor watched the captured human transmissions in silence. He listened to their language, their calm voices, their confidence even while surrounded. Varneth approached cautiously. "They're sending messages, sir, encouraging each other to fight on. Should we jam their signals?" Zeltor shook his head. "No, let them speak." "Why?" "Because I want every soldier aboard this ship to hear them," he said quietly. "I want them to understand who we're fighting." He replayed a human voice on the bridge speakers, a young soldier saying, "We are not fighting for victory. We are fighting so that no one can ever take Earth from us." The words filled the room. The alien soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their heads. Zeltor looked around at them. "You see? That is what we face. Not monsters, not weaklings, but beings who will fight for every inch of dirt they call home." He paused, his voice firm. "Mock them again and you mock your own ignorance." The turning point: by the 7th day, the Velkar troops were exhausted. Supplies ran low. Every attempt to advance ended in traps and ambushes. The humans fought smart, never staying in one place, never wasting a bullet. Even when outnumbered, they fought until the very end. At one abandoned station, a single human squad of 8 soldiers held back nearly 200 Velkar troops. They fought for hours, refusing to surrender. When the aliens finally broke through, they found only silence and recordings of human laughter echoing through the corridors. Zeltor watched the footage in silence. He felt something he hadn't felt in years: respect. These are no savages, he said softly. They are warriors of will. Varneth lowered his head. What do we do now? Zeltor looked at the hologram of Mars, now scarred and burning. We withdraw for now. We need to rethink everything we know about them. The human spirit and the Martian tunnels. Colonel Hayes stood with her troops, their faces dirty and tired. Their weapons nearly empty. We've done it, Sergeant Cole said. They're leaving orbit. Hayes nodded slowly. No one believed we could stand against them. But we did. She looked up at the ceiling as if staring through the red dust toward the stars. Let them go, she said. They'll be back. But next time, they'll remember what they faced here. And they'll know humans don't run. Her soldiers smiled faintly. They had survived. Against an empire that had ruled for centuries, humanity had endured. As the last alien ships pulled away from Mars, silent and defeated, a message was sent once more across the human colonies. The legends were true. Humanity still stands. The war on Mars had ended, but the memory of it clung to the Velkar fleet like a ghost. The red planet, scorched and broken, still glowed beneath the fleet's orbit. The humans had not won by strength alone. They had won through patience, cleverness, and courage. For the first time in generations, the Velkar Dominion had been forced to retreat. Inside the command deck of the Talon's Pride, silence ruled. No laughter, no arrogant boasts, only the low hum of engines and the weight of defeat pressing against every soldier's chest. Commander Zeltor stood at the large viewing window, watching Mars fade behind them as the ship slowly turned toward deep space. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a storm. Captain Varneth approached cautiously. Commander, the Council demands an explanation. They want to know why we left the battlefield. Zeltor didn't turn. His voice was low and heavy. Tell them the truth. Tell them we faced a force unlike any we have known. Varneth frowned. You mean the humans? They're strong, yes, but surely not strong enough to stop the Dominion forever. The commander finally looked at him. Strength is not just in numbers or weapons, Captain. The humans have something we do not understand. That is why we lost. The shadow of defeat across the fleet, soldiers moved quietly through the corridors. Their once proud armor was scratched and burned. Their faces were tired, and their voices barely above whispers. The same soldiers who once mocked humanity now spoke their name with unease. I heard one human soldier took down a whole squad before he fell. One said, "They fight like they don't care if they die," another replied. "They care," a third said softly. "Just not for themselves. They fight for each other." Those words spread through the fleet like wildfire. They fight for each other. Even the proudest warriors began to question their beliefs. The commander's reflection. Later, alone in his quarters, Zeltor stood before a holographic display showing Earth, blue, alive and beautiful. He studied it quietly, thinking about everything he had seen on Mars. He remembered the human traps, their ambushes, their refusal to surrender even when surrounded. He remembered the voice of Colonel Hayes, the human commander, calm and steady under pressure. He whispered to himself, "How can such fragile beings hold such strength?" He looked down at his claws, sharp and polished, tools of conquest. And then he thought of human hands, small, delicate yet capable of creating weapons, machines, and hope. He realized something that chilled him. The Velkar fought because it was tradition. Humans fought because it was survival. There was a difference, and it made all the difference. The Council's fury, when the fleet returned to the Dominion's home system, the High Council demanded an immediate hearing. The council chamber was a grand hall of crystal and steel. The elders sat on raised platforms, their eyes glowing faintly with authority. "Commander Zeltor," one of them said sternly, "you were sent to conquer a primitive world. Instead, you return in shame." "Explain yourself." Zeltor stood tall. "I bring you truth, not excuses. The humans are not what we believed. They are resourceful, fearless, and united by something we cannot match." "Impossible," shouted another counselor. "Their technology is old. Their armies are small." "Yes," Zeltor replied, "but their hearts are large. And their will? Unbreakable." The council murmured in confusion and anger. "You exaggerate, Commander. You let fear blind you." "I do not fear them," Zeltor said firmly, "but I respect them. That is something our empire has forgotten. Respect." The hall went silent. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. You will keep your fleet in orbit. We will send another commander to finish what you could not. Zeltor lowered his head slightly. As you wish. But remember my words. Every army that mocks humanity pays a heavy price. Whispers among the soldiers' days passed. The fleet remained stationed near the Dominion's capital world. Inside the barracks, the soldiers gathered quietly, away from their officers. They shared stories of what they had seen. I saw a human blow himself up just to destroy our tanks, one soldier said. He didn't even hesitate, another nodded. My unit captured one alive. Even as we questioned him, he smiled and said, You'll never break us. Others listened, unsure if they should believe. But deep down, they already knew it was true. No one laughed anymore. The commander's orders one night, Zeltor called a meeting of his officers. The room was dim, the air heavy with tension. You have all seen what the humans are capable of, he began. You have seen their courage and their fire. From this moment forward, no soldier in this fleet will speak their name with mockery. Varneth looked at him in surprise. Commander, is that an order? Yes, Zeltor said. It is not weakness to respect one's enemy. It is wisdom. He walked to the center of the room, his tone steady. If any of you wish to laugh at the old legends again, remember Mars. Remember how their primitive weapons tore through our fleets. Remember how they stood when all logic said they should fall. He looked at each of them in turn. We lost not because they were stronger, but because we did not believe they could be. Silence filled the room. No one argued. No one laughed. From that night onward, every Velkar soldier in Zeltor's fleet carried a quiet respect for humanity and a quiet fear. A message from the stars weeks later, while the fleet drifted in high orbit. A faint transmission arrived in an open signal, not encrypted. It came from Mars. The crew played it in the command room. The image was blurry, but the voice was clear. 'Twas Colonel Hayes. To whoever is listening, this is humanity. We fought, we bled, but we stand. If you come again, know this, Honor. We will fight you, not because we hate you, but because we love what we protect. You may have more ships. You may have more soldiers, but we have something you will never understand. She paused, then said the words that echoed through every Velkar heart. We have each other. The message ended. No one spoke. The bridge remained silent for a long time. Then Commander Zeltor said softly, That is why we lost. The order of silence from that day. Zeltor issued a command that spread across the fleet, an order that would be remembered for generations. From this moment forward, no Velkar soldier shall speak lightly of humanity. There will be no mockery, no laughter, and no arrogance when their name is spoken. You will treat them as warriors. You will speak of them with respect. His voice carried across every ship, every station, every outpost. At first, some officers questioned the rule, but the veterans who had fought on Mars said nothing. They simply lowered their heads in agreement, because they remembered. They had seen what humans were capable of, and they knew that silence was the only response worthy of those who stood against death and refused to fall. A quiet lesson later that night, Zeltor stood alone again at the viewport, watching the stars. Varneth joined him quietly. Do you think they'll come after us? He asked. Zeltor smiled faintly. No, humans don't seek revenge, but they never forget. They'll remember Mars and they'll be ready for the next time. Do you think there will be a next time? There is always a next time, Zeltor said softly. Empires rise and empires fall. But I believe humanity. They endure. He looked at the stars again. Once we thought ourselves legends. Now I see that the real legends walk among them. Varneth said nothing more. He simply nodded and left, leaving his commander to the quiet. For a long time, Zeltor stood there in silence, the same silence he had ordered across his fleet. It was not a silence of shame, but of understanding, the kind of silence that comes when one meets something greater than fear. The Velkar fleet drifted silently through the void, a shadow of its former pride. The once boastful soldiers no longer laughed. The halls of the Talon's pride were quiet, filled only with the hum of engines and the whispers of those who had faced humanity and survived. Commander Zeltor walked along the deck, observing his troops. Some practiced maneuvers, some polished their armor in silence. All were subdued, their faces reflecting thoughtfulness, a mix of awe, fear, and respect. For weeks they had processed what they saw on Mars. The humans had not been monsters. They had not been weak. They had been extraordinary in ways the Velkar had not understood. Lessons learned. Zeltor's mind returned to the battlefields of Mars. He remembered the tunnels, the ambushes, and the courage of a handful of human soldiers holding back an entire squadron. He remembered Colonel Rebecca Hayes, standing calm in the chaos, speaking words that reached across the stars. "We fight not because we hate you, but because we love what we protect." It was simple. It was profound. He realized that no army could conquer a people with hearts that refused to break. No weapon could defeat a spirit willing to endure the impossible. The commander spoke quietly to himself. Strength is not measured in fleets or firepower. It is measured in will, and humanity has an unbreakable will. The fleet's transformation. Varneth approached, bowing his head slightly. "Commander, the fleet waits for your orders." "We are changed. The soldiers do not speak as before. They respect humanity." Zeltor nodded. "Good, let this silence be our guide. We no longer mock. We no longer underestimate. We prepare ourselves with knowledge and caution." He walked past the crew, observing every face. Once these soldiers would have laughed at old stories. Now even the youngest recruits spoke softly, aware of the legends they had once dismissed. The fleet had learned humility. A message across the stars from Mars. Another human signal arrived, calm, steady, and unafraid. Colonel Hayes appeared on the view screen, speaking to all in the Dominion who could hear. "To those who survived the battle, know this: we are humans. We endure, we adapt, and we fight not for glory but for each other. The legends you laughed at were real, and they are still true." Zeltor watched silently. The words resonated through him. "We do not seek to conquer," Hayes continued, "but we will never allow ourselves to be conquered. If you return, remember our faces, our courage, and our spirit. You may have technology, but we have each other, and that is something no empire can destroy." When the transmission ended, Zeltor remained motionless. For the first time in his long life, he felt the full weight of respect for another species. The return to the Dominion. When the fleet returned to the Velkar home system, the High Council demanded another report. The chamber was as grand and intimidating as ever. The elders' eyes glowed as they awaited Zeltor's words. "Commander," the High Chancellor said, "you have returned with only a fraction of your force. Explain why you failed to complete your mission." Zeltor stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I have not failed, High Chancellor. I have learned, and I bring knowledge of a people unlike any we have faced before. The humans are not to be underestimated. Their strength is in their unity, their courage, and their will to survive. Mars has shown us that no empire can conquer them without great cost." The council whispered among themselves. Some were angry, some confused. "Commander, you speak as if humanity is more than a primitive race," one counselor said. "Because they are," Zeltor replied. "If we proceed without understanding them, we will lose more than we gained. The Dominion must recognize the truth, or history will remember our arrogance." Silence fell across the chamber. Reflections on Mars later, alone in his quarters. Zeltor reflected on everything that had happened. He thought of the alien soldiers who had laughed at the old legends, now quiet, thoughtful, changed. He thought of the human ingenuity, their patience, and their refusal to surrender. And he thought of a single truth, one that would remain with him forever. Legends are born from courage, and humanity, he realized, was living proof. The commander whispered almost as a vow to himself. "We laughed at legends until we saw them in action, and now we will never forget." The soldiers change across the fleet. The soldiers carried the lesson of Mars into everything they did. Training drills became exercises in observation and strategy, rather than arrogance. Conversations once filled with mockery now included respect for humanity. "I never believed the stories," one soldier said quietly to his friend, "but they were true. They fight for each other, not for conquest, and they will never break." His friend nodded. "I understand now. Laughter at their stories would be dishonor." The Velkar had learned humility not through defeat alone, but through witnessing something greater than themselves. The human legacy, meanwhile, on Mars, Colonel Hayes and her soldiers continued their work. They repaired their defenses, strengthened their positions, and prepared for the possibility that the Velkar might return. "History will remember this," she said quietly to her team. "Not just the battle, but the courage we showed. The humans who came before us fought with the same spirit. We honor them by standing tall." Her soldiers nodded. They had survived an empire that believed it was unstoppable, and in doing so, they had proven a simple truth. Humans do not yield. Humans endure. Humans prevail. The legend continues back on the Talon's Pride. Seltor stood before the main viewport staring at the stars. He whispered the words he had come to believe. Legends are real. And we have witnessed them. The fleet moved silently through space, carrying the memory of Mars, not as a defeat alone, but as a lesson in respect, humility, and the power of will. No one aboard laughed anymore. And in that silence, a new understanding was born. The Velkar Dominion had faced humanity and survived, but it was humanity that had left a mark on them forever. The future awaits Sil. Tor knew that the Velkar would one day return to the Sol system, but they would do so differently. No more arrogance, no more mockery, only caution, respect, and a recognition that they were facing a species unlike any other. As the fleet moved farther into space, a quiet truth settled over every Velkar aboard the ships. The humans are not to be underestimated. They are legends walking among the stars, and somewhere, deep in the hearts of the Velkar soldiers, a new kind of pride was born, not in conquest, but in understanding and respect for a species whose courage and spirit were truly extraordinary. The laughter that had once echoed through the fleet was gone. In its place was silence, and a silence filled with awe, respect, and the knowledge that some legends were more powerful than any weapon. Mars had changed the Velkar, and humanity had proved that legends are not just stories. They are real,